You kept my name on every form, but not in your memory. I wasn't invited to the wedding, not asked to speak at the funeral, but when the hospital needed a signature, they still called me. For years, I paid the bills, signed the forms, kept the lights on behind the scenes. They never said thank you, just silence. So one day, I made that silence official. I stayed out of duty, out of a promise to someone who loved me before they erased me. But love without acknowledgement? That's not family, that's survival. If you've ever felt like a ghost in your own family, this story is for you. You'll see how drawing boundaries can become an act of healing, and how dignity can be louder than guilt. I mailed the marriage license. I shredded the insurance forms. When they finally called to yell, I didn't answer. I was making fresh bread with the man who stayed. If you're still waiting for an apology that never comes, don't skip this. You might finally give yourself permission to let go. Before we dive into the story, if you're enjoying these meaningful stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on more. Now, let's start the story together. I wasn't supposed to be here, but the hospital still had my name. I parked just outside the main entrance of St. Clair Medical. Engine idling long enough for the windows to fog. A manila folder rested on the passenger seat, edges worn, corners soft from months in the glove compartment. Inside were insurance authorizations, contact forms, and a note scribbled in my own handwriting. Only if absolutely necessary. Apparently, today was. The December air bit at my cheeks as I stepped out. Snowmelt mixed with the faint smell of bleach followed me through the automatic doors. Christmas music played from overhead speakers, one of those synthetic versions of Silent Night that sounded more robotic than reverent. I didn't expect anyone to greet me, and no one did. The nurse at the front desk looked up, nodded, then slid a clipboard toward me like we were resuming a transaction. "Emergency contact still Danielle R?" she asked. I nodded. Still. She didn't ask for ID. She didn't ask who I was. The name was there, in bold type, unchanged, just like Grandma Clara said it should be. Room 218 was quiet, dimly lit. My mother was seated by the window, face partially shadowed. Her coat was still on. She didn't rise when I walked in. She turned just enough to register me. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was sharp, not surprised, like I had invaded a sacred silence. The hospital called. Her lips pressed into a line. She didn't answer, just looked back at the snow beyond the glass. On the bed, Walter, my father, lay still, thinner than I remembered, gray replacing whatever color used to be in his face. Machines beeped, but no one spoke. I sat at the table by the bed and opened the folder. I signed where the nurse had marked with yellow tabs, gave consent, updated phone numbers, noted his allergies. His date of birth hadn't changed. "Anything else?" I asked. Elaine shook her head once. It was the only acknowledgement she offered. "I'm not here for closure," I said, rising. "Just logistics." No reply, not even a nod. The hallway felt colder as I left, or maybe it was just the contrast. I passed the nurse again. She didn't look up. Back in the car, the folder went back to its seat, this time flatter, lighter. No one called after me. No one ever does. I checked the front row twice before walking down the aisle. I already knew they wouldn't be there. The cherry trees had bloomed earlier than expected that year. Their pale pink petals fluttered down with the breeze like confetti nature forgot to gather. Malik stood at the altar in his best gray suit, adjusting his tie with a nervous smile that only I could read. The backyard was lined with string lights, flickering gently in the late April sun. Neighbors, co-workers, college friends, they all filled the rows, buzzing with warmth, all except the front left. We left those seats open, 4 white folding chairs with little reserved signs tied in silk ribbon. No one dared ask why. 2 weeks before, I had called my mother. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I wanted to tell you about the wedding plans. It'll be small, just in the yard. I made a rose trellis, and Malik's baking the cake himself." There was a pause. Then her voice, dry and clipped. It's a busy season. I nodded, even though she couldn't see. I just thought you might want to. We'll see, she cut in. Then silence. She didn't ask the date, didn't say goodbye. The wedding went on anyway. I walked down the aisle holding a bouquet of peonies and daffodils from the garden. My knees were steadier than I'd expected. Malik's eyes held joy, even if mine had to split it with something else. We read our vows beneath the rose trellis while petals drifted around our feet. The cake leaned to one side, but no one cared. Someone's toddler dropped a juice box in the punch bowl. We laughed. But later that night, when the house had gone quiet and Malik was asleep beside me, I scrolled through the photos. I paused on one, a shot of us kissing under the fairy lights, and posted it with one line, "Married, finally." The call came after midnight. "You really thought that was a wedding?" My mother's voice hissed through the speaker. "No church, no pastor, no family, just a yard and some folding chairs?" I didn't answer. I didn't even cry. I just looked across the room at the unopened box still sitting on the bookshelf. I had wrapped it for them. 2 ceramic coffee mugs painted with the date, April 18th, 2020. Still untouched. That was the moment I knew. They didn't just skip it. They erased it. I didn't stay connected out of love. I stayed because of a promise I couldn't break. The pharmacy in Westerville had my number saved. "Hi, this is Rachel from Northgate. Walter's refill is ready," they'd say, as if I were still part of something. I confirmed the insurance, approved the pickup, then hung up like always, efficient, emotionless, just like I'd trained myself to be. At work, I sat behind a desk labeled Claims Specialist, though some days it felt more like Emotional Detachment Coordinator. I processed paperwork for strangers with warm families, fathers whose kids visited, mothers whose daughters dropped off groceries. Meanwhile, I filed updated contacts for 2 people who'd left my wedding chairs empty. Malik caught me once, staring blankly at a rejection form. "Why do you still manage their files?" he asked. I didn't answer, not really. If I remove myself, their copay resets. They'd lose coverage. That was the surface-level truth. The real one lay buried under years of trying not to feel. The promise wasn't made to them. It was to Grandma Clara. It was the spring of 2021, her last Tuesday. I remember the hum of her oxygen tank, the faded lilacs in the hospice vase. She took my hand and whispered, "You don't owe them joy, but blood stays blood, even when it's thin." She was gone by morning, but her words stayed rooted. So I kept their lights on. Paperwork, forms, silent favors. I never signed with my full name. I never picked up their calls unless it was a pharmacy or billing office. Malik never pushed, but I knew he didn't understand. One night, he placed a mug of chamomile on my desk. "You help people who pretend you don't exist." I paused, then replied, "It's just logistics." My voice barely reached above the steam, but even I didn't believe it anymore. And still, I kept the lights on behind the scenes, not for them, not even for Grandma Clara, just until I could let the promise go, soon, but not yet. I didn't come to make a scene. I came to leave a mark. The envelope sat on my passenger seat the whole drive. I didn't play music this time. The tires hummed along I-71 as if trying to distract me, but my thoughts were louder. By the time I stepped into the hospital lobby, the air smelled of pine-scented floor polish and alcohol wipes. Garland hung above the reception window. Someone had taped a paper snowman to the intake counter, its crooked smile staring back at me. I handed the sealed envelope to the nurse without explanation. "Certified copy," I said. "Marriage license, please add it to their records." She glanced at it, then back at me. "You're their emergency contact?" I nodded. My name was already in the file. Had been. Always had been. Even when no one wanted to say it out loud. She tucked it into a folder and scribbled a note. "It'll be added. Anything else?" "No," I said. "That's all." The hallway to their room felt colder this time. Less sterile. More personal. Maybe it was the faint chime of carolers echoing from the atrium, or the peppermint-sweet breath of some volunteer pushing a supply cart. It was almost festive, in a way that felt insulting. When I opened the door, my mother looked up first. Her face didn't move, except for a subtle twitch in her jaw. My father, sitting up now, stared toward the TV on mute. Some commercial with laughter and glittering sweaters, the kind of family we never were. "I brought documentation," I said, placing my coat over the chair, then taking it right back up. "Certified, in case it ever matters." No one asked what I meant. I reached into my tote and pulled out a printout. "Insurance is handled. You're being discharged tomorrow. The follow-up info is in your file." Elaine opened her mouth, closed it. Walter blinked, then turned away as if I were just another nurse on rotation. There was no warmth, no apology, and for once I didn't crave one. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was accurate. "You'll need to arrange transport," I added, placing a note beside the pitcher of untouched water. "My part's done." I stood there for one moment longer, long enough to let the weight of what I'd said land. "I brought documentation," I repeated. "So next time they ask who showed up, you won't have to lie." Still nothing. No thank you, no denial, not even anger. Just the same air between us, filled now with the sound of their quiet realization that I had not come to be seen. I had come to be recorded. As I stepped back into the hallway, I didn't feel light or triumphant, but I felt clear. Neither of them said a word as I walked out, which for once felt like the truth. If they couldn't remember me as a daughter, I'd make sure they remembered the silence they gave me. The voicemail came just after 9, slicing through my breakfast like a serrated knife. "How dare you?" My mother's voice crackled with anger, sharp and theatrical. "You humiliated us. You've always loved playing the victim." No mention of the hospital, no mention of the years. Just rage and volume, recycled from some old grudge she never cared to explain. I didn't play it twice. Instead, I set the phone down and finished my coffee. It had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. Some things lose their warmth and still do the job. That afternoon, a letter arrived, hand-addressed in crooked cursive that made my stomach tighten. Walter. The last time I'd seen his handwriting, it had been on a birthday card when I turned 18. It read, "Good luck out there." No signature. I waited until dusk to open it. The apartment was quiet, save for the whistle of wind through the window seams. The letter trembled in my hands. So did the words. "I know I failed you," he wrote. "Not sure what to say after all this time. Maybe we could talk. Or maybe it's too late, but I wanted you to know I think about you." It wasn't forgiveness he asked for. It was permission to pretend the past was less sharp than it was. Malik didn't ask what it said. He just watched me with those steady eyes that never pressed. When I folded the paper and tucked it into the junk drawer, he brought me tea and sat beside me. That was his way of saying, "I see you." Later, I unlocked the cabinet. Second drawer. Third folder. "First ribbon," it said in faded Sharpie. Inside was a thumb drive. I hadn't touched it in years. I hesitated, not from fear, but from the weight of remembering. The file played through old computer speakers. A tiny voice burst with joy. "Mom, Dad, I won first place." Then a pause. A heavy, cutting silence, followed by my father's bark. "Is that why dinner's not ready?" My mother's reply came next, distant and cold. "Go to your room, Danielle. We'll talk later." And then, nothing. The sound of that silence had haunted me longer than their voices ever could. I opened my laptop, created a new email. No greeting, no explanation. Just the subject line, "For your records." I attached the audio file and hovered over send. I thought of Grandma Clara's words, "You don't owe them, not even your silence." And yet, this silence, my silence, wasn't a gift. It was a record. Click. I wasn't asking them to remember me with love. I was demanding they remember me at all. I shut the laptop, locked the drawer, and turned off the light in the room. And I didn't check for replies. Not that I expected any. Silence, after all, had become the most honest language between us. And tonight, for once, I spoke it fluently. They never walked me down the aisle. So I stopped walking circles around their silence. The early March sun hung low and soft in the sky as I made my way through the farmer's market just outside Columbus. The air was crisp, but not cold, enough for a light jacket, and the smell of fresh earth and blooming crocuses lingered on the breeze. Stalls lined the sidewalks, brimming with spring vegetables, homemade preserves, and the kind of baked goods you just couldn't resist. In my hand, I carried a wooden photo frame. It was simple, oak with an engraving fading along the bottom edge. Thank you for walking me to this day. I had never given it to them. Never could. It sat wrapped in tissue paper, tucked away in my closet for years, a symbol of a walk I was never offered. Near a donation table outside a local co-op, a volunteer was sorting through sweaters. I hesitated only for a moment before placing the frame gently on top of a pile of books. She looked up, smiled softly, but said nothing. I nodded back and turned away, feeling the weight of a final goodbye. The act wasn't dramatic. No one applauded. No one asked why. It was simply done, and that was enough. At home, the scent of fresh bread filled the kitchen as I unpacked the small bag of groceries, eggs, a loaf from the market, and a jar of honey. Malik was at the stove stirring something in a pan. When he looked up, his eyes met mine, and a smile spread across his face. No words were needed. He knew. Later, I opened the drawer in my office where the last remnants of my parents' paperwork were kept. The stack of insurance forms, letters, and medical bills had been growing thinner over the years. I picked them up one by one and fed them into the shredder until the drawer was empty. The sound of paper disappearing echoed quietly, like closing a chapter. Turning on my computer, I typed one final message to the hospital administration. Effective immediately, I am no longer authorized to act on behalf of Elaine or Walter Halloway. I hesitated, then signed it simply with my full name, Danielle Halloway Turner. That evening, Malik and I shared a humble dinner. No candles, no music, just the peaceful quiet of two people content in the moment. We talked about nothing important and everything meaningful. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A blocked number flashed on the screen. I watched it ring once, twice. Then I let it go to voicemail. I didn't answer. Because I wasn't seeking anything anymore. Not forgiveness, not permission, not even acknowledgement. Malik reached for my hand, his touch warm and steady. "What now?" he asked gently. I smiled, a smile full of relief and quiet strength. Now I live. And for the first time in years, that felt true. As I finally let go of the silence that once weighed me down, I found a quiet peace in choosing my own path forward. Family can be complicated, but sometimes true love means setting boundaries and embracing healing in your own time. If we learn to listen, not just with ears, but with heart, we might discover that forgiveness is less about others and more about freeing ourselves. If this story touched you, I invite you to share your thoughts or simply hold its message close. Thank you for listening.